What's the craziest incident that happened in your school? Our substitute teacher turned out to be a wanted fugitive who had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. It started on a regular Wednesday morning when our history teacher called in sick. The office sent us this substitute named Mr. Blake, who seemed perfectly normal at first. He was probably in his 40s, wore a cheap suit, and had this nervous energy that most subs have when they're trying to control a classroom full of teenagers. What made him different was how much he actually knew about history, like scary amounts of detail. When we were studying World War II, he didn't just read from the textbook. He started telling us stories about specific battles with details I'd never heard before. The thing about D-Day, he said, is that most people don't realize how many things went wrong that morning. Then he described the weather conditions, the exact time certain units landed, and even what some of the soldiers had for breakfast. My friend Jake raised his hand and asked, "How do you know all this stuff?" Mr. Blake paused for a second, then said, "I've always been interested in military history. Did a lot of research over the years." But it wasn't just World War II. When someone asked about the Civil War, he knew which generals ate what for dinner before major battles. When we talked about ancient Rome, he described the streets of Pompeii like he'd walked them himself. The weirdest part was how he kept checking the windows. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward the parking lot like he was expecting someone. When a police car drove by during lunch, he actually ducked behind his desk. "Sorry," he said when we all stared at him. "Thought I dropped my pen." On Friday, things got really strange. We were supposed to watch a documentary about the Revolutionary War, but the DVD player wasn't working. Instead of calling the tech guy, Mr. Blake just started telling us the entire story from memory. He described the Battle of Yorktown like he was giving a play-by-play of a football game. "Washington positioned his troops here," he said, drawing on the whiteboard. "The British didn't expect the French ships to show up when they did." My classmate Emma asked, "Were you like a history professor before this?" He got that nervous look again. "Something like that. I taught at a small college up north before I moved here." But when Emma asked which college, he said he'd rather not talk about his previous job. "Bad memories," he mumbled. The next week, Mr. Blake was back again because our regular teacher was still sick. This time he seemed even more paranoid. He kept the classroom door locked and asked us to keep the blinds closed because the sunlight was too distracting. During lunch, I saw him eating alone in his car instead of the teacher's lounge. When I mentioned it to my mom that night, she thought it was weird too. "Most teachers love socializing with other teachers," she said. "Why would he isolate himself?" Everything came crashing down on Tuesday morning. We were in the middle of learning about the Underground Railroad when the principal's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Blake, please report to the main office immediately." His face went completely white. "Class, keep reading chapter 12. I'll be right back." But he never came back. Through our classroom window, we could see police cars surrounding the main office. About 20 minutes later, we watched them walk Mr. Blake out in handcuffs. The principal came to our classroom looking shaken. "Your substitute teacher won't be returning," she announced. "Please continue with your regular curriculum until your teacher recovers." We were all dying to know what happened, but she wouldn't say anything else. It wasn't until the local news aired that night that we found out the truth. Mr. Blake's real name was David Martinez, and he was wanted for embezzling $2 million from a museum in Oregon 3 years ago. He'd been living under a fake identity and working as a substitute teacher to stay under the radar. The reason he knew so much about history: he used to be the head curator at the museum he robbed. He'd stolen artifacts and sold them to private collectors, then disappeared when the FBI started investigating. What finally caught him was his own expertise. Another teacher had overheard him talking about a rare Civil War artifact and realized his knowledge was way too specific for a random substitute. She got suspicious and looked up his fake credentials. The craziest part was that he'd been substituting at schools all over our district for almost 2 years. Nobody ever questioned why a history expert was working as a part-time sub instead of teaching full-time somewhere. My friend Jake summed it up perfectly. So we basically got taught by a professional criminal who knew more about history than any of our real teachers. When our regular teacher came back, she admitted that our test scores from those 2 weeks were the highest her classes had ever achieved. "I hate to say it," she told us, "but that guy really knew his stuff."